She died from a mysterious and sudden sickness over the summer.
Obviously, it was devastating and it was so, so sad. And I just couldn't believe that somebody as young as Betty and as generally healthy as Betty could possibly happen.
Welcome back, and thanks for being here. Now, going to the emergency room when you're sick can be scary, but when doctors can't figure out what's wrong or how to properly treat you, it can be downright terrifying. And that's what happened in today's case. A perfectly healthy woman would suddenly fall ill, and doctors could not figure out why. And before they could figure out what was wrong with her, she would lose consciousness and never wake back up again. Betty Bowman was born as Betty Sponsel on December 13, 1990 in Wichita, Kansas, to Nancy and David Sponsel. Betty was said to be outgoing, adventurous, loyal, and caring. She was also known to always be doing something for somebody else. Betty loved trying new food and traveling to new places. She also loved to spoil her dog, Sir Crumpet II, who was a Welsh Corgi. Betty graduated from the University of Kansas School of Pharmacy with a pharmaceutical doctorate in 2017, and then she completed her residency in Topeka, Kansas in 2018. While Betty had been attending Kansas University, she had met Connor Bowman, and after dating for a few years, they would get married on May 30th, 2021. After their wedding, Betty and her new husband Connor would move to Rochester, Minnesota, where she would work as a hospital pharmacist at Mayo Clinic. Here, she was known to be a very hard worker, and she took great pride in her work. Her coworkers said that she always had a positive attitude, and you could see how much passion Betty had for her job. And Connor was completing an internal medicine residency also at Mayo Clinic. At the beginning of their relationship, things were great. Even though Betty had a lot of friends and Connor didn't, they made it work because they loved spending time together. Connor would dote on Betty, and she spoke very highly of him, saying how smart he was and how he had a great work ethic. At some point in their relationship, the couple decided to start having an open marriage, and they would begin dating and sleeping with other people. And they would also bring their dates back to the home that they shared. However, the agreement between the couple was that even though they could see other people, neither of them was to get too emotionally attached to anyone else. While Betty would stick to dating men and women who she met in person, Connor was online dating and, as a result, was dating a lot more women and had a much more active sex life than his wife. Not long into their open marriage, Connor started lying to Betty and not telling her who he was dating or when he would be going on dates. Sometimes he would say that he was working late when he was actually going out on dates with other women. Betty, on the other hand, was very open with her communication and her honesty. So, Connor's behavior really started to bother her. And Betty would soon discover that the reason that Connor was not being so honest with her was because he had actually met a woman who he quickly became infatuated with. Connor wanted to be with this other woman all the time and was not respecting the boundaries that he and his wife had set. All the lying and secrets started to become a very big problem for Betty. But she still wanted to try to work things out with her husband because she loved him, and that was just the kind of person that she was. Betty would never yell, and she would never talk negatively about a person. She was very positive, so she figured that if she tried hard enough, she could make their marriage work. Then on August 16th, 2023, Betty was suddenly hospitalized with symptoms similar to those of food poisoning. She had been admitted with severe gastrointestinal distress and dehydration. Her condition would then deteriorate rapidly. Once she was admitted to the hospital, Betty began experiencing cardiac issues, fluid buildup in her lungs, and eventually organ failure. Betty also had to be taken into surgery at one point to have part of her colon removed, as it was discovered to contain necrotic tissue. From the hospital, Connor called Betty's mother Nancy and told her that her daughter had been admitted to intensive care, as she was very sick, but Connor didn't give her many other details at that time. Not able to get a flight from where she was in Wichita, Kansas to where Betty was in Rochester, Minnesota, Nancy, along with Betty's older sister, got in their car and drove the 9 hours to go see her. So Betty's mother and sister would make it to the hospital very early the next morning, and when they went in to see Betty, she was very weak. She could barely drink by herself. However, she could still speak with her mother and sister, and they gathered that she did not understand the seriousness of her situation. Betty's mother had asked her daughter how she was feeling, and Betty told her that she wasn't feeling right, but she would be okay. She couldn't quite understand why it was that her mother and sister had driven so long just to see her when she would be better in a matter of days. So Betty's mother and sister did not get very many answers out of her. However, Connor was there to speak with them, and when he did, he told them that Betty was suffering from hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis, or HLH, which is a rare autoimmune disease where the white blood cells build up and cause organs to shut down. And that is exactly what Betty's organs had started to do. So even though this is a very rare autoimmune disease that Betty had never previously shown any symptoms of, Betty's mother and sister believed Connor. Doctors had no idea what was wrong with Betty. They were running tests left and right, but could not figure out what was going on. Sadly, they wouldn't be able to figure out what was ailing Betty until it was too late. Betty wasn't doing well, and on her third day at the hospital, she would suddenly lose consciousness. Then on August 20th, 2023, Betty Bowman passed away from what was said to be a sudden onset of an autoimmune and infectious illness. However, tests for HLH, which is what Connor said that his wife had, would come back as inconclusive. Upon performing an autopsy on Betty's body, the chemical colchicine was found in her system. This is a drug that is usually prescribed for gout, and Betty did not have a prescription. So, how did it get in her system was the question. The thing is, even if the doctors who had treated Betty knew that she was being poisoned by colchicine, there is no specific cure for a lethal dose of the drug. Medical experts usually try to treat the symptoms as they appear, and can even try dialysis to get it out of the system, but it's not guaranteed to work. Only a day after his wife Betty's death, Connor called the medical examiner's office and began urging them to cremate her. He claimed that not only was her death natural, but also his wife did not want to be a cadaver. He also asked an investigator if the toxicology results that would be done during her autopsy would be more thorough than the ones done at the hospital, and he asked what exactly she would be tested for. Super suspicious the day after. Also, just the day after Betty had died, the medical examiner's office contacted the Rochester Police Department and told them that they had stalled Betty's cremation from taking place due to the unusual circumstances surrounding her death. The medical examiner had actually received a phone call from a woman who said that she knew the Bowmans and knew that they were experiencing marital problems. Betty and Connor had actually just been discussing divorce recently. Not only had Connor been lying to Betty about who he was seeing and where he was at, they also did not see eye to eye on the subject of having children. While Connor was ready right now, Betty was not quite ready yet. On top of that, Connor had been hiding a large amount of debt from his wife, and shortly before her death, she had found out, and the couple had been then keeping separate bank accounts. So after 8 years together and 2 years of marriage, Betty had been contemplating divorce. Now, once she told her family and friends that she decided she was going to leave Connor, they were very supportive of her, telling Betty that she deserved better. In addition to these very odd things, Connor also was not acting like your typical grieving husband. He seemed stoic and calm and had even gone out for drinks with some of Betty's friends 2 days after she died. And while there, he appeared to be happy or at least indifferent about his wife's death. Now, one of Betty's friends had actually gone over to her house to help Connor pack up some of Betty's things. And when she had gotten there, Connor's girlfriend, the one he had been dating and become obsessed with, was also there. Betty's friend said that Connor and this girlfriend were very touchy-feely the entire time, and the girlfriend would end up spending the night. Also, she noticed that every single picture of Betty had already been taken down. Connor and this girlfriend, however, would end up breaking up not very long after police had started asking questions once they had become suspicious of Connor. So about a week prior to Betty's death, Connor had actually made her and one of her friends smoothies. But Betty had said the smoothie tasted weird, so both of them had dumped it down the drain. Betty's friend thought that not only was it odd that the smoothies tasted so bad, but it was also odd that Connor even made the smoothies to begin with, because he never did anything for anyone else, this friend said. Betty's friend at the time had even jokingly said to her that she thought Connor was trying to poison her. Betty had even joked that she had considered it, but didn't think it would happen. And just a few days after the smoothie incident, Betty would text her friend, telling them that she could not meet up as they had previously planned because she was not feeling well. She said that she had actually become sick the previous night after drinking a rum cocktail that Connor had made for her. So at this point, there was clearly a lot of suspicion focused on Connor. As such, detectives began to investigate his online history. When they did, they found that Connor had repeatedly checked Betty's online health records from August 20th to the 31st. And at one point, he had also been placed on her care team, which allowed him to access her records without even having to log in with his credentials. Betty's friends would say that around the time authorities had started to become suspicious that he was guilty of Betty's death, they had as well. When police began to question Betty's friends about what they knew in regards to her death, Connor had started quizzing these friends about what police had asked them and what they had told them. So at the time of Betty's death, Connor had actually been assisting with poison control calls at the University of Kansas Health Systems. And in October, the university contacted police after they found that using his university-issued laptop in the days prior to Betty's death, Connor had searched for colchicine as well as sodium nitrate, which can limit the amount of oxygen in a person's body. Police immediately seized this laptop, and what they would find when they searched through it would leave no doubt in anyone's mind that Connor was responsible for his wife's death. Detectives found that Connor had used an online tool several times to convert Betty's weight to milligrams, and then he had multiplied that by 0.8 milligrams, which is colchicine's lethal dosage rate. Connor had then used an online pharmacy to purchase some colchicine, and very smartly, he used his work email when he was buying it. When he was later confronted by police about this search, Connor insisted that Betty was actually the one who had purchased the drug that had killed her. He said she had only put it in his name so that nobody would know that she had been the one that purchased it. Okay. Police also found queries on Connor's phone about whether internet search histories could be used in court, if police could track a package, and if you could delete Amazon data. While they had been at Connor's house seizing his electronics, police had also found a bank deposit slip in the amount of $450,000, very close to the amount of Betty's life insurance policy. And there was even more incriminating evidence that was found on both Connor's laptop and cell phone. He had Googled, "Is widow gender neutral?" on August 18th, 2 days before Betty had died. Then there was the fact that Connor had not waited long at all to continue online dating after his wife died. It was 9 days before Betty had even died that Connor logged into his Bumble dating app and changed his marriage status to widowed. Connor had chatted with one woman while on Bumble, and he had told her that he had received a $500,000 payout from his wife's death. He told her he was going to use this to pay off his student loan debts, and she thought this was very odd that he was even telling her this. Another woman who the clearly grieving husband spoke with had asked Connor if it was okay for him to be flirting with somebody so soon after Betty's death. Connor told this woman that Betty would have been happy for him because she would have wanted him to move on. Sure, but not days after she died. Maybe years. Connor had also told this woman that his wife had actually died from listeria poisoning the previous summer. However, he told another woman that he had started talking to that Betty had died from a morphine overdose the year prior. So after investigators had obtained all this evidence against Connor, he was placed under arrest and charged with second-degree murder. He was then held on a $5 million bond. It was also discovered that Connor Bowman had in the past treated a patient which had caused harm, as well as a complaint that was filed with the Minnesota State Board of Medicine, though there's no further information on what exactly happened in that situation.
Tom and Caitlin, I spoke with the officiant of Betty and Connor's wedding. His wife, Micheline Everhart, met Betty in medical school, and the couple became close friends. They flew to Rochester for the funeral service. After the service ended, they say Connor showed Micheline the lab reports and asked if anything stood out to her as a doctor. At the time, they thought it was Connor trying to make sense of her death. They now question if he was looking to see if other medical doctors would notice what he saw with his poison control background.
At the time, nothing seemed out of place or unusual, but I start to look back now and you think, well, maybe, well, what was that about? Well, it's just, you just start getting haunted by little things that you would think nothing of at the time, because why would you?
Betty's friends tell us they were in shock when she passed this summer. A young, energetic woman who loved life, now gone.
I mean, obviously it was devastating and it was so sad, and I just couldn't believe that somebody as young as Betty and as generally healthy as Betty could possibly happen. But I work in the intensive care unit, and so I see, unexpected things happen that way. And so knowing that situations like what was supposed to have happened.
Recent news that Betty's passing has now led to murder charges has loved ones reeling. They say although her story has taken a sad turn, they remember her for her positive outlook on life.
Literally a week before she left, was her describing this double rainbow that she saw in the morning before work while she was walking Crumpet, and she wished us all happiness and hoped that we found beauty in our day, and that was just her.
Then on January 4th, 2024, Connor was indicted by a grand jury on an upgraded charge of premeditated first-degree murder, as well as second-degree murder with intent. He is facing the possibility of life in prison if he is found guilty. Betty's funeral was held on August 27, 2023, in the River Park Chapel at the Mackin Funeral Home. Guests were encouraged to wear rainbow/pride and corgi-themed attire. This is a terrifying scenario that Betty found herself in. While she clearly knew that her marriage was on the rocks, she never thought that her husband would hurt her, let alone kill her, even after those terrible-tasting smoothies that he had made. Connor was no longer putting in effort to their marriage, and he had met another woman whom he seemed to have wanted to move on with. So, why did he need to kill Betty? I assume he didn't want to be left with nothing after the divorce, and figured, instead, he should just kill Betty, collect her life insurance policy, pay off all his debts, and live a happy life. Luckily, that's not what's going to happen.